Today, on Outside the Box Reviews, all will be carved. We are taking a look at the NECA John Carver figure from Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. And in this review, there will be no leftovers.
I was really excited when NECA announced they were doing a John Carver figure, though the way they released him was a bit weird. I'm still not sure if it's going to show up in stores or not. They had it seemingly exclusive through their website, and then it popped up on Big Bad Toy Store, so I'm not entirely sure still if this is like a pre-release through their website and then it went out other places, if it's like a fan channel exclusive like Hasbro does, or it ends up being specialty stores but not like mass retail like Target or Walmart, or if Big Bad Toy Store just did what they do when it's exclusives at places like Premium Bandai and just bought some stock and put it up for sale on their own website. Though I'm less inclined to believe that one because the price on this was pretty much the same as NECA. I got mine through Big Bad Toy Store and I didn't pay more money like I would if I was getting one of those P Bandai exclusives. But I was really happy to get my hands on this figure because Thanksgiving was one of my favorite movies of 2023. I'd been really wanting to see this movie ever since the teaser trailer popped up in Grindhouse, and then the Machete movies happened, so it felt like, yeah, this could happen. We should be getting Thanksgiving. And then Eli Roth just kept making other things instead. But finally we got it. I got to see it like a day early, still a slightly advanced screening of it. And this figure just kind of makes sense for NECA to do because it is another character in coveralls, and they have been using the hell out of that coverall body for a while now. So then the question becomes, was this just a quick, easy repaint, or is this a quality ultimate action figure? Let's go ahead and take a closer look. With our John Carver figure, we get a total of 7 hands. Oddly enough, he has more left hands than he does right. I don't remember if he was left-handed in the film. I don't think he was, but it's just kind of interesting to get this breakdown. So here in the center, we have 2 different kind of trigger fingers. The one on the right hand, the finger extends out a little bit more than the one on the left hand, but they're both still kind of that trigger pose. We then get a selection of wider grip hands, one left and right, and we also get on the ends here a selection of tight grip hands. These are more for like your knives and things where the hand is pretty close. The fingers are actually fused together on these on the underside, so you can't really peel his fingers apart to hold any of the bigger weapons. The outlier here is this one hand on the left is a kind of medium grip hand. So tighter than the looser grip, but still not as tight as the one where the fingers are actually stuck together. Flipping the hands over, you get a little better look. I probably should have shown them this way first anyway, but you could see those differences in the grip. You can see the trigger fingers a little bit better. And one thing to note here is the pegs are built into all the hands, and the hinges vary based on the hand. So our 2 tighter grip hands here and here, as well as our 2 trigger fingers here, the hinge goes up and down for kind of adjusting the hand, like if you're aiming a gun up and down, or to get a little extra swing or posturing with a knife or the meat tenderizer. The other hands, like this looser grip one here, and the looser and medium grip ones here, have the kind of more standard in and out hinge. So it does give you some different posability options when it comes to how you want John Carver holding his weapons. And to bring in the macro lens here, just to give you a quick look at some of these, they are really nicely detailed. You can see the 3 seams going down the back. There's a lot of wrinkles throughout them. You can see kind of the elastic on the inner part of the wrist, on the underside. Honestly, very nicely done gloves. They're very shiny, and I think they're picking up the browns from the wood I have around it. So it almost looks like there's a wash or dry brushing on these on my camera here, but that's not what I'm seeing in real life at all. But you can see if I block the light off a little bit, that goes away. So it's not that color in real life. They are just kind of glossy black. But yeah, pretty nicely detailed little hands for this guy. For accessories, John Carver comes with quite a few different weapons that he uses throughout the movie. First up, we have this kind of stiletto knife. It's pretty simple kind of blade, very symmetrical looking from the front and back, so not a whole lot of difference between one side or the other. It's got a nice kind of glossy black handle with some silver details and then a nice silver blade on it. You can see here it fits really well in his hand. This is the tight grip hand. I believe this is the knife he uses on the trampoline kill with the cheerleader. It's hard to tell because you don't actually ever see him holding it, but as far as I could tell rewatching the film, I think this is that knife. Next up, we have the kitchen knife. This is pretty standard fare for any slasher. We've seen them come with Jason figures, seen them come with Michael Myers figures. I don't think this is a reused one. I could be wrong. It looks similar to some of the newer Halloween movie ones, but it doesn't have a blade guard, and I think all the Halloween ones have something going on there. So it may be a new knife, or I may just not be remembering what it's from off the top of my head. But again, glossy black handle, nice silvery metal bits on there. Fits in that tight grip hand again very well. As for where this was used in the movie, I'm pretty sure this was used when he's holding the one girl hostage while her friends are trying to shoot him. Can't remember if he uses it at the dinner scene as well. Honestly, I was trying to rewatch the movie to remember how all these things were used, and for like maybe the first 30 minutes of the movie, I was really paying attention to where things were, and then I just kind of got sucked into watching the movie and forgot to pay attention for what I was trying to watch it for. Next up, we've got the meat tenderizer. Really nicely done, kind of a coppery color for the hammer head itself, and then a wood handle on there. Pretty much a symmetrical item. They have some nice detail on the little tenderizing bits there on the one side of it. Not a whole lot going on the back side of it though. Another piece he holds in that tight grip hand very well. And of course, this is the thing that he uses at the dinner scene to bash that one dude's face in. So definitely a nice one to include here. The only minor complaint I'd say is I do kind of wish any of these weapons were bloody. This in particular, I think would have been cool if it had like some blood and maybe even like chunks of brain on it. Not that I can't add that myself, but I don't know. All the weapons here seem just a little too clean for me. But that's a minor gripe. And honestly, if they were bloody, I might be complaining the opposite knowing me, so who knows. Next up, we've got the tranquilizer gun. This is kind of a really dark gray plastic. The gun itself is maybe kind of, not exactly a matte finish, but maybe a semi-gloss kind of finish to it. And then it has the glossy black magazine that sticks into the top of it. There's a lot of nice details on this, a lot of different like seams and lines and everything. I don't know firearms particularly well, and I don't even know if this is a real gun or just something they made up for the movie to be their tranquilizer gun. But there's enough detail on here to make it feel like it's really something nice and detailed and realistic. He does hold it in that trigger finger hand really well, so he's all ready with this to take out the cop and the Russian dad. Next up is a weapon I don't remember being used in the movie. It's a sledgehammer. I even looked it up online. I saw other people asking the same question, like why is it included with this figure? Or they didn't notice it in the movie either. It's done well. The head of it is shaped really nicely like a sledgehammer. They kind of added that speckled paint job to it they've done on some metal items over the years that I really think works well here. Again, no blood or anything on here. Another place I feel like they could have added it. The handle looks pretty good, has a nice wood grain and some paint wash going on as well. He holds it pretty well in his wider grip hands. But yeah, it's just kind of an odd one. Unless it was like from a deleted scene, but I don't even think it's in deleted scenes because I'm pretty sure I watched most of those, so I'm not really sure where this came from at all. But seeing it in his hands makes me kind of think maybe we'll get a remake Leatherface somewhere down the road, and then he could have this accessory repackaged with him. Next up, we've got one of his most iconic weapons from the film, the axe. They did a really nice job on this one. The metal has a good color to it. They actually put in all the little bits of pitting and stuff over the axe head to give it that antique look. The shape of it's really nice, both the head of the axe and the handle. The handle itself has some nice wood grain effects going on. Not a whole lot of paint showing that wood grain, but enough to make it look pretty decent. And again, he holds this well with his gripping hands, his wider grip hands. So I really like this accessory. This is probably the one that I'm going to pose him with the most. It's probably the one I think he's going to get posed with the most just overall between anybody buying this thing, because that was really his main weapon in the movie. And it just looks really cool with him. And lastly, he comes with his musket. Actually, it's not really his musket at all. I don't know if he ever even touches this thing in the movie. But he comes with a musket that is crucial to the film itself. Really nicely detailed. Again, a darker wood grain than we have on some of the other wood bits that he has. It has some kind of nice brass and silver details on it. All the trigger mechanism and all that, the flintlock kind of deal. Was it considered a flintlock on that? I don't remember. It all looks really nice. It's very nicely sculpted. A lot of detail went into this thing. The side without the flintlock is still nice looking, not quite as detailed just because there's less going on that side, but overall it looks really good. He does hold it well with his gun firing hand and one of his more open hands. I think this is the other trigger finger hand I put on here to have him hold it. Only real downside of it is that the barrel is pretty shallow on there and it's painted the same metal color as the rest. Might have been nice if they put like a matte black on there or something so that it looked like it kind of faded down into the shadows, but a minor gripe, something that I could easily fix if I wanted to. And still, I think overall it looks really nice. Probably not something I'm going to pose him with ever, honestly, just because he doesn't use it in the film, as far as I remember. But it felt like it had to come with him. The downside that we got the sledgehammer is that there are a couple other weapons that would have been nice to include. Honestly, the one that pops to mind most is the electric knife that he uses. That would have been kind of cool to include with him. And then not a weapon, but I would have liked maybe for them to include his little headset when he's using the voice modulator so that we could really recreate the dinner scene. And I guess while we're at it, the apron. I borrowed Leatherface's apron for that shot in the beginning of this, but it would have been cool if he came with the apron. Though I do know the apron is something they just bought off Amazon, so maybe getting the licensing rights for that were too annoying for NECA to bother with. And it's, maybe not a big enough piece for it to be worth all that effort. But it kind of would have been cool to include if they could have. Taking a look at the head sculpt, we're going to actually start off looking at the hat here. It's a pretty simple item, but I think they did a really good job on it for the most part. We have the gold buckle in the middle. It's basically a black hat, and they have the sash going around it, which is a slightly more matte sash. So it helps differentiate between the main part of the hat and the actual sash. It's also sculpted in there, so it kind of just stands out on that route. The hat is kind of made so it has this almost free-form cloth feel to it, so it's not like a super rigid shape around the edges, which seems appropriate for, that pilgrim style hat. It's made of a soft rubber, so it's relatively pliable. It fits on his head okay. The only downside to me is that it doesn't stay on super well. So as I was moving this figure around, posing him with the different weapons and stuff earlier, probably about 50% of the time I touched him, the hat popped right off. It's not a big deal. It pops right back on later. And honestly, I'd almost rather have the hat be too loose than to be too tight and to leave a mark on the figure or something, like we saw with the hat that came with the Phantom of the Opera figure. So not a terrible thing, but just something to keep note of if you are moving this guy or posing him. If he just falls on your shelf, there's a good chance that hat's going to go flying. Honestly, this figure looks really incomplete without the hat on. The character really never has the hat off as far as I remember. But because it was casting some heavy shadows, I'm going to leave it off while I review the face sculpts here. So this is, of course, the standard John Carver mask. From what I can remember, this looks pretty accurate. I don't have a side-by-side I can compare it to available to me while I'm talking right now, but I think it looks pretty good. A lot of things I saw were people got weird shapes going on with the hair coming off to the side. People had the beard being way too crazy sometimes. People had the top of the head being way too crazy with much more of an indent. And I think this looks pretty spot on from what I can tell. The coloration's nice. There's a lighter brown for the hair with some kind of dark washes in between to kind of show the strands of hair in there. The beard, mustache is all kind of a lighter color. Same with the eyebrows. He's got that great kind of you can see the details of the eyes, but then just these simple holes drilled in it, like a cheap vacuum form mask would be. He's got a little bit of color there on his lips as well. And I really like this mask sculpt in general. I think they did a really cool job designing this thing. It's very creepy looking. I think in the original teaser trailer it was just kind of a faceless pilgrim, and I think this actually works really well. And I mean, it's kind of perfect. If the first person to rule your colony is named John Carver, it kind of fits for a slasher, huh? The mask kind of just sits right there on the face of the figure. So once again, retaining that vacuum form mask feel. He has that balaclava on behind it, and the mask just kind of sits flush with the front of the face, which is exactly what we would expect with that style mask. While we're at it, the balaclava, not a whole lot going on here. It is some wrinkles. We have a seam going through the middle of it. Not really any color variation or anything like that. Just a really simple kind of covering for the head. So if you want to exchange the mask, it's as simple as just pulling it off the face. And yeah, that's what we got under it. So you may recognize this face underneath it as the face they gave their Harry Warden figure, with the exception of the fact that it looks like he's had a full frontal lobotomy with a giant peg being carved out of the center of his forehead. So this seems to be a case of them reusing a piece they already had made and just making it so they could adapt in these faceplates. Because we never see John Carver unmasked in the film. We find out who's behind the mask, but we don't ever see the person, without the mask in the rest of the costume. I really don't have any problem with them using a generic face underneath it. It's funny because I wouldn't expect it to be there. It really shouldn't be there, but it doesn't really take away from the figure either. So just to show the other side, that is the peg inside the mask itself. It's not a whole lot inside the masks, and then they simply and securely peg into that face. So it makes a pretty positive connection, and that's all you really need to have with this, right? So the second head is pretty much the first head repeated with some blood splatter going on, mostly on his right side. You can see a lot of it dripping down there. It does carry over to the left, a little less extreme, but still there. I think this looks really cool. Just kind of continues on that look, but you could have a little more brutality here. This is also kind of what makes me wish some of the weapons had some blood on it. I don't need all of them to have it, but since we do have a bloody face, it'd be cool for him to have some bloody weapons to go with it. And even though I can't really zoom out with this macro lens right now, I just wanted to show him quickly with his hat on, just so you can kind of get an idea for what that is. And then our third face is the really cool but really pointless burnt face. So you can see here the mask has kind of melted. They have some black and brown paints on there to kind of give it a charred look. They have some scratches. You can see the one side of the face is kind of drooping down as it was melting. So it's more heavily scarred on his left side, the face that was pointed down on top of the oven. And then the other side is a little melted, but not as melted. The hair on the edges is more singed as well. And overall, it just kind of looks like a mess. And I love this look. It just, in the movie, made no sense that he did this to his own mask and then promptly replaced it shortly afterwards anyway, so it just was like, oh, we want another mask for the film. And then just for reference, there it is with the hat on as well. And while I've got this head sculpt on him, or this mask on him, I just wanted to throw in this pitchfork in his hands. Another thing that we probably should have gotten, probably instead of the sledgehammer. This pitchfork came with the new Ghostface figure that just arrived at my door today, the kind of Stab 8 Ghostface. I think, looking at pictures, this might be the same pitchfork that we got with Part 3 Jason, but I don't really feel like digging that up at the moment. But honestly, I did just want to show that he can hold this thing, and it looks pretty cool. Looking at the rest of the figures, not a whole lot we haven't seen before. These are our very standard coveralls that we've seen a lot lately, mostly with our Myers figures, but also with our Harry Warden figure or My Bloody Valentine Minor figure. They have updated the collar. It is a folded down collar, as opposed to like Myers and I think even Harry Warden having an upturned collar. So it's just simply that piece of rubber removed from the jumpsuit and then a new one put in place to give it that look. All the kind of lines and wrinkles are in there that we'd expect, the kind of seam down the middle where the zipper is hidden, the pockets in the front, all the various wrinkles throughout it. I will give it that it has a really nice semi-gloss color to it. Some of the jumpsuits we've got in the past have looked very glossy. With the light I have on here right now, it does look kind of glossy in this setting, but to the naked eye, it has a pretty matte finish that makes it feel more like fabric. So I really do like that they gave that kind of effort here. Turn him around to the side, take a look at his arm, see all the wrinkles in there. Again, even though we've gotten this body a lot of times, I do like the way they have the joint set up where it kind of flows with the rest of the fabric while still giving you a fair range of articulation on there. I will also say having the gloves that are accurate for this movie does help this too, because it does give it something different at the ends of those arms than we're used to seeing with other versions of this body. Flip it around to the back, more of that detail going on here. Looks pretty good. We got the pockets on the back there. We have the kind of cinch around the waist. Then we can spin it around again and see his other arm. We bring the camera down lower. You could see that my set is up on stilts. And the height of all the pieces behind John Carver has been a complete lie this whole time. Oh no. But you could also see that there are the same kind of wrinkles we'd expect in the pants going on there. Looking very good. And that same detail continues onto the back of the figure. Despite the body being reused, I do want to point out they have given us accurately sculpted boots for this figure. I'm already spacing on the name of these boots after just looking at them on Amazon, but they do match up with those. The same little swooshes that you see on the side there, the kind of trim lines on them and everything. These are accurate to the boots used in the film. So that's really nice. So if we're going to get, reused parts, and honestly, I mean, it makes sense we get reused parts. They're parts that can be reused. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to reinvent the wheel with coveralls when this pair works just fine for what they need to be, outside of just the fact that, it gets annoying if you have a bunch of these figures side by side, that they all look the same in terms of what they're wearing, like it's all wrinkling exactly the same and all that. But I do love that they took the time to give us the boots that match the film, and we do get treads and everything at the bottom as well as peg holes on both feet. For articulation, he can swivel at the neck, look a little bit up. You are going to expose his skin underneath the balaclava if you go up too much. He will also look a little bit down. That same rubber bit there kind of prevents him from looking too much down, really. I wonder, can you swivel it in there? You can kind of swivel that back in and get a little more of a downward look, but nothing too extreme. You can, of course, tilt at the head as well. The arms will do a full 360. They'll go out to the side. We have our double jointed elbows. We also swivel at the elbow. We already talked about the wrist articulation, so you can swivel, and then depending on the hand, depends which way you can hinge. These ones are the medium grip or looser grip, so you can go in and out with them. Still really wish there was a way to get some articulation in the torso. I mean, there is a joint there. You could feel it. Honestly, this seems to move a little better than some of the previous jumpsuit figures we've gotten. Actually, it's not bad. It just puckers weird in the middle doing it. But I really wish there was a more medium ground where you can get better articulation without ruining the sculpt completely. I don't know how you would do that, honestly, without having a compromise there or use cloth clothing, but I just wish there was a little more articulation for these figures, because that's the other problem if you're using the same figure, the same body over and over, and you can't twist at the torso, so they're all kind of sitting in a similar pose, really. You can just really move the arms and legs to change the angle they're at and everything. You have the kind of standard diaper thing going on here at the bottom, so you can kick pretty far forward, a decent amount back. Leg goes out to the side pretty far. We can swivel up the upper leg. The knee bends about 45 degrees. We can also rotate there. The foot hinges down and up. We can rotate as well as pivot. And I will say the other plus side of a body being used as much as this one is, I think the more they make them, and it may become a problem later on, but the joints don't get as tight, it seems, as the other ones. Not in a bad way. This thing just came out of the box able to move pretty freely, as opposed to some other figures I've gotten on new sculpts, where it feels like everything's just so tight on it that you're going to break it, as, you know, is kind of known to happen with some NECA stuff. So this thing kind of came out of the package feeling that you can just kind of pose them however you wanted without having any issues. So that's a major plus. So looking it up, I think both the stuntman and the actual character who is John Carver are like 5'9". Donald Pleasance is 5'7", and like Skeet Ulrich, not that this is supposed to be his ghost face necessarily, but like he's 6 foot. Matthew Lillard's like 6'4". So maybe Ghostface is just tiny. I don't know. Maybe the Dr. Loomis to John Carver is a correct scale, then we just have a tiny ass Ghostface. Yeah, I wanted to just bring in some like normal human characters, and then I saw them together. I'm like, this doesn't quite feel right. But yeah, I think it's Ghostface's fault, actually. So we'll blame it on him. And because it's Ghostface, it could be anybody, so doesn't matter. But also did feel really appropriate to have Ghostface here because, you know, I feel like Thanksgiving was very much in that same vein, that whodunit slasher movie kind of deal. So I think they, you know, kind of fit together in a universe. Overall, I think this figure came out really well. Obviously, I pointed out some things that I wish he came with, some different accessories or whatever, but honestly, my initial impression upon opening up this figure, looking at everything he came with, even though I saw the listing obviously when I bought it, is that I was kind of surprised how much he did come with, and how this felt, to me, more like an ultimate figure than a lot of the things NECA's put out in the past. I've always been critical of that ultimate moniker they've put on things, particularly because they like to call something ultimate and then release 5 more versions of it. And it was especially tainted by some of the earlier offerings they did, where they'd give you Jason figures that couldn't really hold all their weapons properly, and a lot of things were missing hands. They've definitely gotten a lot better about that as time has gone on. But I honestly think this figure hit a lot of the marks that I would look for in a figure of this character. And yeah, I just think they did a really solid job on it. So I'm going to give this thing a strong recommendation. Like I said, I don't know what the distribution plan with this thing is necessarily, if you're going to have to buy it online if you want it, or if it's ever going to show up in mass retail. So you may be relegated to having to buy online if you want him, but I do think it's worth it, especially if you enjoyed the film. It's one of those rare occasions where a figure that the primary bit of it is a reuse from previous other figures still turns out to be a really solid release. So let me know in the comments down below, did you pick up this John Carver figure? And with all his options, how are you going to display him on your shelf? And that's it for this one. I'll see you all next time. Happy Thanksgiving.